Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Vinny's Take. You may ask yourself, why in the hell is a Buffalo Bills fan wearing a cheesehead? Well, let me explain a little background before I get into what I'm doing. You might have heard Vince Lombardi's voice in the background. I am a fan of football history, and more importantly, I am a fan of quarterbacks. Because believe it or not, this rotund figure, although I've lost a lot of weight, was once a quarterback in high school. Not a very good one, but I was a quarterback. At least that's what was listed on the depth chart, on the bottom of the depth chart. Anyway, I love quarterbacks. Some of my favorites, like Jim Kelly, John Elway, but my all-time favorite, of course, John Unitas, number 19 of the Baltimore Colts. But that's a story for another time. Tonight, we're talking about Green Bay, a Green Bay legend, a Green Bay quarterback by the name of Brett Favre. I have this cheesehead that I got back in 1997 when the Packers were in the middle of their Super Bowl runs because the Bills were at that point on the way down. And although I'm a Falcons fan in the NFC, I wanted somebody to root for in the NFC, and I thought owning a cheesehead would be pretty cool. My son loves it. He's a Packers fan, and he can wear it safely, although it's aging, whenever he wants. But I want to talk about Brett Favre. Now, Brett Favre was drafted in 1991 out of Southern Mississippi. While at Southern Mississippi, led one of the biggest upsets in 1989 against Florida State. At his time with Atlanta, where he was drafted, his first pass was intercepted by Kurt Govea and returned for a touchdown against the Washington Redskins, eventual Super Bowl champion Washington Redskins. Jerry Glanville didn't like him, so he shipped him off to Green Bay, and the rest is, as you say, history. Now, Brett, I've always loved you as a player. I've always respected you, rooted for you in your Super Bowls. I once even went on a radio station in my hometown going into Super Bowl 32 and said that the Denver Broncos had no business being in the Super Bowl because Brett Favre and the Packers were going to destroy them. Well, it was egg on my face. As I became an adult and moved on through life, rooting for the Packers occasionally, when the Bills or Falcons weren't involved, of course, became a hard thing to do because Brett continuously made bad decisions, especially in the playoffs and throwing interceptions at costly times. In the 2007 season, a dream Super Bowl of Green Bay versus New England and Brett Favre versus Tom Brady was ruined when Brett Favre threw an interception to the New York Giants in overtime. And then, of course, Giants went on to defeat New England in the Super Bowl, one of the best Super Bowls ever played, but could have been better. 2 years later, Brett Favre has left. There's been a huge issue over him with Green Bay. He ends up with the New York Jets, throws a ton of interceptions there, goes to Minnesota, which is where he wanted to go in the first place, and leads them to the NFC Championship. And in classic Brett Favre fashion, decides to replay the 2007 NFC Championship in 2009 and throws an interception to the Saints, allowing them to head to the Super Bowl, and the Saints win the Super Bowl, and we missed out on Brett Favre versus Peyton Manning. After 2010, and my Buffalo Bills knocked Brett Favre out, ending his career starting streak. Brett thankfully retires. After 20 seasons in the NFL, Brett goes off in the sunset. We don't hear a lot about him. He does a commercial with some razor company where he shaves off his Santa Claus beard. You know, not a lot. He goes in the Hall of Fame. He makes amends with Green Bay. And when he was inducted in the Wall of Honor, Bart Starr actually was interviewed and said good things about him. Here's wherein lies the problem. When you are a legend, you get called for interviews. A lot of guys take them. A lot of guys have made mistakes taking those interviews too, like Joe Namath, showing up to a Monday Night Football game drunk. And there was a lot of backlash on that when he hit on the reporter. But, oops, I got to pop up. Lately, everybody is asking questions about a certain subject, and that would be, in the NFL, Colin Kaepernick. Now, I've made a couple videos on Colin Kaepernick. You know my stance on him. I felt he was the wrong guy to lead the movement. I also don't entirely 100% agree with the movement. I think the stats don't exactly support 100% that what he's saying, but I'm not the right skin color to talk about it, so I'm not going to. But what I am going to talk about Brett Favre. I'm not a celebrity by any stretch of the imagination. But if I were asked the question about Colin Kaepernick or anything going on in current NFL, I would abstain. It's not my place. Too many times these legendary players come back in and think they have a right to talk about what's going on the field now. I haven't played a snap of football since 2003, when I played defensive end for a small semi-pro team north of Toronto, New York. I haven't played quarterback since 1996, so, I probably don't have a right to say anything anyways either, but this is a YouTube channel, and YouTube allows us to do what we want. When Brett was asked about Colin Kaepernick, he decided to make a comparison between Kaepernick and Pat Tillman, saying that he assumes that when all is said and done, both are going to be regarded as heroes. I have a major issue with that. One, both ended their careers by their own choice. I don't care what the narrative is that Kaepernick is unsignable. Kaepernick walked away. He took his option out of his contract with San Francisco, and he refused to sign a contract when offered it by Baltimore a year later. Also, last year's charade of a workout, he doesn't want to play. He wants to be the martyr. Pat Tillman walked away after 9/11 to join the Army and become an Army Ranger and fight for this country. Pat Tillman was then and is now a hero to all. Very few people would say Pat Tillman is a disgrace. Very few people would be angry with Pat Tillman. Pat Tillman died for this country. Although, yes, it ended up being friendly fire, it still was in an active battle. Colin Kaepernick alienated half the population. So regardless of how you feel, which side of the fence you're on, if you're pro the protest or anti the protest, Colin Kaepernick and Pat Tillman do not belong in the same sentence. And I think Brett Favre understands that, because he recently sent out a tweet or a Facebook post trying to walk back what he said. Let me see if I can find it. I don't think so. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Basically, he said that he was asked a question and he was trying to come up with an answer, and I think he now didn't want. My opinion, he looked and saw what happened with Drew Brees, and he didn't want the same thing to happen to him. Okay, fine. You don't want to be canceled in this cancel culture like Drew Brees was almost canceled because he took a stance. Brett, you weren't asked to take a stance. You weren't. You were asked your opinion on Colin Kaepernick. You could honestly say, I don't have one. I'm not active. I wasn't active when the protests were going on. He retired after 2010. The protest started in 2015 or 2016. Didn't have a reason to have an opinion. So many times I fear that people in society are afraid of what's going to be said about them if they make the wrong choice. I personally know that my YouTube videos are not going to get pushed because I come out, especially with Stack to the Future, we come out as conservatives and we say things politically that aren't the popular narrative. But that's okay. I'm not making these videos to get rich. If I was, I wouldn't have a mask that's falling apart. Besides which, I don't need the mask. You can look back at my older videos and see what my face is. The mask is a tribute to, in case people are wondering, the mask is a tribute to Pancho Villa, a huge, big-time Buffalo Bills fan who passed away last year from cancer. So I wear the mask as a tribute. But I'm getting off the subject. Back to where I was. So, Brett, I've always respected you. I don't know how you're going to get out of this one. I think you've lost yourself a lot of fans. And that happens all too often with retired athletes. They get out and they say something. They get, and this isn't new. It's not. It goes back a long way. They take a job. They fail at a job or something. They say something. They act poorly in a movie. O.J. Simpson murders his wife. I mean, athletes, they don't know what to do with themselves when they retire. They really don't. Back in the 50s or 60s, when an athlete retired, they went and had another career, and you never really heard much about them. But lately, they retire wealthy. They don't know what to do. Some of them get on social media and don't get off. I've really rambled. Anyway, that's my take on Brett Favre. I think he created a firestorm that he didn't mean to. I feel sorry for him. because there is no right answer for how he's going to get out of this. And I don't really care what his politics are. He's never really been one of those that have been openly political. So I think more importantly, the news media, especially the sports media, need to stop asking questions to guys that it doesn't pertain to. Now, while we're on that subject, NASCAR, they're going through some changes. They've made some decisions that have alienated some fans. I'm sure all of you know about it. But here's one thing we can all get together and agree on. Last night, a noose-like object was found in the garage of Bubba Wallace, the driver of the number 43 car. And if you're not a fan of NASCAR and you don't know who Bubba Wallace is, look it up. Regardless of NASCAR's stance on the national anthem and regardless of their stance on the Confederate flag, there is no reason for anybody to do something that despicable to another driver, to another man. So I've heard the FBI is involved, and I applaud the FBI. I hope they find the guilty party, whoever it may be. And I hope that guilty party suffers. But anyway, that's my take. What's yours? As always, I'm Vinny Vincent, and God bless America.